face twisted with pure hatred. A tall figure in a black coat and top hat, standing in the stone archway of an underground vault, staring at her with malice she'd never seen in her entire life. His face looked contorted, evil, menacing beyond words. He was solid, not transparent like a ghost should be. And the moment she saw him, the entire left side of her body went numb, like it was frozen. Something yanked her hand. This is the Midnight Registry.
In the space between midnight and dawn, when the world turns cold and the light is gone, something's watching from the tree-line edge. These are the stories they don't want you to know.
Before we get into tonight's story, I want to give credit where it is due. This encounter comes from a Reddit user who goes by Vertigo Saint 90, posted on r/paranormal. In 2019, she took a ghost tour through the infamous Edinburgh Vaults in Scotland, a place with a dark and violent history. What she saw in those underground chambers has stayed with her ever since. A face twisted with pure hatred, a figure in a top hat and a black coat, and something that followed her back to her hostel. Full credit goes to Vertigo Saint 90 for sharing her experience. You can find the original post on Reddit at r/paranormal. In June 2019, a woman traveled to Edinburgh, Scotland for the film festival. It was her first time visiting the city, and she was fascinated by its dark history. Edinburgh is one of the most haunted cities in the world. Centuries of plague, murder, and poverty have left their mark. One evening, she decided to take a break from watching films and do something touristy. In her hostel, she found a leaflet for the Edinburgh Vault tours. She's a serious history buff. She had some paranormal experiences in the past, but nothing too intense. She felt confident enough to go alone. She had no idea what was waiting for her in those underground chambers. The Edinburgh Vaults are a series of chambers formed in the 19 arches of the South Bridge. Built in the late 1700s, they were originally used to house businesses, workshops, storage, even taverns. But the vaults had a problem. They weren't properly sealed, and water leaked in. The conditions became unbearable. The businesses left, and the homeless moved in. For decades, the vaults became a shelter for Edinburgh's poorest and most desperate: criminals, prostitutes, the sick and the dying. People lived and died in those dark, damp chambers beneath city streets, and according to local legend, some of them never left. The tour began above ground in Old Town Edinburgh. It was the middle of June, around 6 or 7 p.m, and the sun was still out. Bright and warm, not exactly the right atmosphere for a ghost tour. But when the guide led them to the entrance of the vaults, access through a normal building and down a flight of stairs, everything changed. Before they went in, the guide gave them one instruction: make sure your shoelaces are tied. The floor is very uneven down there. The woman double-tied her laces. She didn't want to trip in the dark, and she had no idea why the detail would matter. Once they were underground, the atmosphere shifted completely. Cold, damp, dark. The stone walls seemed to press in from all sides. The guide told them about the spirits that haunt the vaults. The first is a small boy. He attaches himself to women he considers motherly figures. He likes to hold their hands, and is known to untie shoelaces. The second spirit is Mr. Boots, an evil entity, violent, malevolent. You can hear him stomping around in heavy boots, the sound echoing through the chambers. The boy is terrified of Mr. Boots, and according to the guide, so is everyone else. The group moved from chamber to chamber as the guide recounted stories of ghostly encounters. People who felt hands on their shoulders, cold spots that appeared out of nowhere, voices in the dark. The woman was fascinated, a little spooked, but mostly intrigued. Then they entered a room where an old fireplace used to be. The guide stood in front of it, a couple stood in the archway leading to the next chamber, and the woman stood next to them, facing the guide. She decided to take a photo. She raised her phone, and that's when she saw him. Behind the couple, in the archway, stood a man, tall, wearing a long black coat or cloak and a top hat, pale with white skin, but it was his face that made her blood run cold. She'd never seen so much hatred in her entire life, so much pure, twisted evil. His face looked contorted with rage and malice. He looked human, solid, not transparent, like you'd expect a ghost to be. He was there, and he was staring right at her. The moment she saw him, the entire left side of her body went numb. Cold, not just cold like standing in winter air. Cold like that side of her body had been plunged into ice water and frozen solid. Then she felt something yank her left hand. She tore her eyes away from the figure and looked down at the left side of her body. Nothing. No one pulling her hand. When she looked back at the archway, Mr. Boots was gone. Thank God. The guide started moving everyone to the next chamber. The woman did not want to walk through that archway, but she couldn't stay in the small room either. She went to move forward, and that's when she looked down at her left shoe. The shoelace was undone, but not just undone. It looked like someone had wrapped it around their finger and carefully piled it on top of her shoe. Deliberately. Impossible to happen by accident. She gasped out loud and called the guide over. The guide looked at it, baffled. I've never seen that happen before. The woman wanted to tell the guide about seeing Mr. Boots, but she couldn't. She felt like if she spoke about it, she'd somehow get in trouble, like a child who's done something wrong and knows they'll be punished if they confess. The fear is overwhelming, primal, so she stayed silent. But she wasn't the only one who experienced something that night. A big bodybuilder type man had been standing in a corner, clearly skeptical of the whole tour. Thought it was nonsense. Then he suddenly jumped and whipped around. He'd heard someone clap loudly in his ear, but there was no one behind him, and no one in the group had clapped. The tour ended. Everyone returned to the surface, and the woman went back to her hostel, relieved to be out of those vaults. But it wasn't over yet. Back at the hostel, she was sharing a room with a few other girls. She told them about the tour, minus seeing Mr. Boots, because she thought no one would believe her. The girls were fascinated. They chatted about Scotland for a while before the woman decided to go to sleep. She climbed into her bunk, the bottom one, and closed her eyes. And then it happened. That feeling came back. The frozen, paralyzed sensation, just like in the vault. Her eyes were half open. She could see the two girls still sitting on the bed, talking. She wanted to call out to them, but she couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't scream. She was completely paralyzed. She doesn't know how long she was stuck like that. Minutes, hours. Time felt distorted. Eventually, she found she could open her eyes fully, and then move her fingers, and then her arms. The paralysis released. The girls were still talking, completely unaware of what had just happened. The woman didn't sleep for the rest of the night. She lay there, in the dark, wondering, did Mr. Boots follow her out of the vaults? There's something else you need to know about this woman. She's always had strange experiences on the left side of her body. Whenever anything paranormal happens, she feels a shiver go down the entire left side. That feeling of someone walking over your grave. But only on the left. When she was 3 years old, she was in a terrible accident. Her dress caught on fire and she was badly burned. The part of her body most affected? The left side. Ever since then, that's where she feels the paranormal. That's where spirits touch her. That's where Mr. Boots grabbed her. Why the left side? She doesn't know. But something about that childhood trauma opened a door, and things on the other side know it. So who, or what, was Mr. Boots? The Edinburgh Vaults have a brutal history. Poverty, disease, violence, and death. People died down there in the darkness, nameless and forgotten. Some believe Mr. Boots was a violent man who lived and died in those chambers, perhaps a criminal, perhaps someone consumed by rage and hatred. Others think he's something older, something that was drawn to the suffering in those vaults and made them his home. Whatever he is, witnesses describe the same things. The sound of heavy boots stomping through empty chambers, a tall figure in Victorian clothing, a face twisted with malice, and their overwhelming sense of evil. The woman who encountered Mr. Boots will never forget his face, the pure hatred, the twisted evil. She saw him as solid and real as any living person. He wasn't a trick of the light or a shadow. He was there. And when he looked at her, she felt something grab her hand. The little boy spirit trying to protect her from Mr. Boots? Or was it Mr. Boots himself marking her? She'll never know. But she knows one thing for certain. Something followed her out of those vaults and into her hostel room that night. Something that held her paralyzed in her bunk while her roommates talked, completely unaware. Something that touched the left side of her body, the side that's been marked since she was 3 years old. The Edinburgh Vaults are open to tourists every single day. Thousands of people walk through those chambers, hearing stories of Mr. Boots and the boy spirit who unties shoelaces. Most of them experience nothing. They leave thinking it was just entertainment, a bit of fun. But some people see more than they bargain for. They see a man in a top hat. They feel the cold creep through their body. They feel something grab their hand in the darkness. And sometimes those things follow them home. If you ever find yourself in Edinburgh and decide to tour the vaults, remember this story. Tie your shoes tight. Stay with a group. And if you see a tall figure in a black coat and top hat standing in one of those archways, don't look into his eyes, because Mr. Boots is still down there, waiting, and he's looking for someone new to hate. The shoelace detail is what convinced me this case is genuine. Anyone can claim they saw a ghost, but the deliberate coiling and piling of the shoelace, witnessed by the tour guide who'd never seen it before, that's physical evidence of intelligent manipulation. And then it followed her to the hostel, miles away from the vaults, held her paralyzed in her bunk while her roommates talked, completely unaware. Mr. Boots didn't just scare her, he marked her. The left side of her body, the same side burned in childhood, went numb both times. Coincidence? I don't believe in coincidences anymore. Sleep well.
Welcome to the midnight registry, where the darkness keeps its secrets. Welcome to the midnight registry. Sleep well, if you can.